Move on to the new movie, which is Deadpool and Wolverine. Just came out this year. Plot summary: Deadpool is offered a place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by the Time Variance Authority, but instead recruits a variant of Wolverine to save his universe from extinction. It's directed by Sean Levy and starring Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman.
So what did you think of the new movie?
I'll start real quickly on just like I said, huge comic book fan, read all the comics, love the MCU, love the Marvel X-Men movies. Deadpool was never a comic book character I really connected to. Like I said, I got into Marvel later, and he definitely is like the perfect character if you're like a 12-year-old to love. So I was never
Hmm.
really into him much in the comics, but I did really enjoy that first movie, especially not in X-Men Origins Wolverine. His first appearance was a disaster, but Ryan
Hmm.
Reynolds bringing Deadpool to the screen, I thought that movie was fantastic. The second one was okay, good, but not as funny and groundbreaking as the first one. But this movie I absolutely loved. I thought it was the best of the Deadpool movies, and so far, for sure, my favorite movie of the year.
Oh,
I
wow.
had an excellent time at the theater seeing it. I thought the movie succeeded on the humor with the pathos, with giving me, like, I laughed, I cried, I got all the emotions in this movie too. And then seeing Hugh Jackman come back, which I was very worried about and disappointed in when they initially announced this movie, because him ending his performance in Logan was so incredible and just a crowning achievement in film and in comic book movies, and so good that I was like, are they gonna ruin this in some way? And I think Hugh Jackman brought it like hard in this movie, and really especially juxtaposed against what Ryan Reynolds was doing, and the tone of this film being so much different than Logan. They really relied on Hugh to be the one serious part of this movie, even more so than Deadpool, who definitely can get serious at times. And I thought his a couple scenes that he did were absolute standouts that we'll get into more as we get into the film. But yeah, I had a fantastic time. We'll definitely be seeing it again in theaters. The first movie of the year, I can say that about. Like, having left it, I'm like, I have to see this again within the next 2 weeks. What about you? And again, like, what I can't recall if you'd seen the Deadpool films before, how familiar you
Yeah.
are with Wade Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, no secret, I'm not a big comic book person, but actually before even Deadpool, going back to X-Men, I will say I think the first X-Men movie came at a time where maybe I was the most ripe, I guess, to kind of watch a movie like that. And I remember really enjoying it, even though there are parts of it that sort of drag and such, and we'll, potentially get into that. But found Wolverine very interesting and exciting. And I do love the concept of sort of mutants and sort of what's happening with them. And of course, I at some point gave up with that whole franchise, but I stayed with it, I think, for a little bit. Like even the James McAvoy Fassbender movies
Hmm.
are actually quite fun, First Class and such. I quite enjoy them, actually. It's one of the few comic book movies that I actually own is that
Oh,
one.
first class.
Because I found that really fun and really cool.
Mhm.
But Deadpool, I had no familiarity with this character, but the first movie was actually really fun, really enjoyed it. The whole story behind the making of it and how Ryan Reynolds kind of got it together, all that was pretty admirable, but also it was funny and just felt kind of groundbreaking at that time. I didn't watch the second one because I don't know, there wasn't, by then my superhero fatigue was, I guess, setting in, so I
Mhm.
just didn't. I have to burst your bubble with this one, which is that I don't know, maybe just the headspace I was in or where I am now, this whole Ryan Reynolds shtick of sort of self-aware and these jokes, I just cannot get past it. And I understand why they are fun and funny. And in this movie, especially, like he's really, taking on the superhero universe, the
Mhm.
corporations, and the whole thing of real life and what's happening in the movie. It's interwoven in the plot of the movie, but also interwoven in the character and this constant fourth wall breaking and all of that and music and blood and it just is so self-aware that I just can't really get past it. I understand why this would be fun at an intellectual level, but it's just not for me. I
Mhm.
just that's sort of that. But I will say he was amazing. He commits, that's the thing. Whenever he shows up, whatever he does, he commits to it. And you can see the thread line or the through line of this character. Like you were saying, who's played a character for so long. And I was worried too when they announced this movie for, obviously topping what he did in Logan, but
Hmm.
also, this episode is being recorded on the heels of Robert Downey Jr. going back to the MCU.
Hmm.
I had a similar reaction. I was like, go do something else. Like, you've done this, you've proven you've reached the highest high. So I was like, oh, there we go again, cash grab, what have you. But he brings it in the movie, and that made me happy. And he, looks great. Like, this is an older man,
Yeah.
and I don't know how this is still going on, but looks amazing. And that was the fun part for me to watch him. And it was sort of even emotional at times to see him go back to this character and carry this through line. And you can see the build up. But yeah, otherwise, no.
Yeah, I thought the scene, especially when they were in the Honda Odyssey, and Logan basically rips into Deadpool and yells at him and basically like tearing him down because the Deadpool character, what makes him, I think, interesting and works so well is that he is much like a teenager where
Right.
he makes fun of everything because he's hiding like internal pain that he cannot address. The first movie that was the pain of him getting
Mm-hmm.
cancer and then, breaking up with his girlfriend or not being able to be with his girlfriend. And the second movie, it was about the loss because the girlfriend dies and he has to deal with that. And in this movie, it's this feeling of rejection that he is trying to grapple with. And again, that's the meta comment on the whole corporate mergers and being laid
Right.
off and all these things that are the larger themes of the film. But and Logan just like basically like dresses him down and he does it even at the end. I think he says like, what, do you have nothing to say? Like for once he Deadpool doesn't have anything to say because he's really calling him out for who he actually is and calling out his pain and like why he's covering it up with all this adolescent humor. And I think Hugh Jackman's performance in that scene is rivals a lot of the things that he even did in Logan for me. And that is something that you can tell because he is been with this character for so long and feels authentic to what that version
Mm-hmm.
of Wolverine from that universe would do and be that direct. It just that scene especially was a standout
I
for
agree.
Hugh as well. And I just don't think anyone else could have pulled something like that off if he had not been with this character for so long, which, yeah, you can say maybe initially cash grab, but see, I think that's what separates again like Hugh from
Mm-hmm.
other actors because he would never do a cash grab for Wolverine. Like I believe because he
He
cares so much
cares.
about the character and how audiences would react to it, he would only come back, and he did if it was done right. Which again, I think they definitely checked every single box here on how they were bringing Wolverine back, the purpose it served in the movie, how it went back again to that theme of how you deal with feeling rejected and like you don't matter. And that
Yeah.
Wolverine kind of struggles with that in this movie too. And I think that what Hugh can bring as a good actor to this role really helps a lot too. But more so on the movie overall, and the things that worked for me too were the cameos in the movie. I call them cameos, but they were more like actual like guest appearances
Right.
from several of the older Marvel characters from Fox, like Elektra and Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four movies. Like they brought these characters in, and it was cool to see these actors back in these roles, especially Blade, which like I
Right.
thought that was just I died. I screamed. That was incredible. Those movies mean so much to me. Wesley Snipes looked amazing. He even quoted the ice skating line, which is like one of the best lines that ever uttered in any movie. He, quoted that again. And I love the little dig at the Marvel Blade movie too about there's only going to be one Blade. Like that was incredible. People love that line. But they brought these people in not just to be like, oh, here's some cameo porn. Like, oh, look, who that it's this person, it's this person. It's like, no, they fit again. These were all rejected characters. They weren't bringing back the McAvoy Professor X or these characters that are already still popular. These were characters that either might have been rejected at the time, like that Elektra movie totally failed,
Mm-hmm.
or people have sort of forgotten about. And I think that fits in really well with the theme. And they got to have big action scenes. And I like how they didn't die on the screen. I was worried they were like, oh no, are they going to go here and protect Ryan Reynolds, Wade Wilson and Logan at the end, and they all die. And we have to watch Blade die. Like I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And they did it. They sort of like disappeared into a cloud. I really like that. And then speaking of characters and actors, I don't know if you're that familiar with the Channing Tatum Gambit thing.
Right. Right.
That
Yeah.
also was just like amazing to see a character who didn't even make it to the screen. He was so rejected. Like
Right.
Channing Tatum was actually rejected by Disney when they bought Fox. They canceled that movie immediately, and that was his passion project that he was working on for several years, and his dream was to play this role. So it was meta comment here with having him come in, and that was so great. I mean, he is such a good, talented comedic actor that I don't think that's maybe the way he would have played Gambit in the movie if he actually had made a real Gambit movie, but dialed that up to 11 in terms of the humor. But that cameo stuff worked really well. Had you seen any of those movies? The Elektra movie, the Blades, the
Blade,
Fantastic
of course,
Four?
I've seen, but I don't think I've seen Electra, but very familiar, obviously. That's the thing, right? Like these are failed quote unquote movies. I mean, not Blade, but some of the other ones,
Hmm.
but they're still sort of in the pop culture because of what happened. But yeah, I get it, right? Like if you grew up with this and if you're really bought in to the whole thing, like this is like amazing, right? Like all your favorite people, especially the ones that you grew up with and are quote unquote not popular or successful, like seeing all of that is kind of amazing. But I kept thinking, like, what are they trying to do here? Because in some ways, this movie sort of rejecting superhero madness and multiversal madness and all of this, right? And saying and making fun of it, but then also in a way like revering these older past characters and sort
Hmm.
of harkening back to like that time when this was not so commercialized and maybe purer or what have you. But in doing so, it sort of ends up being kind of deeper fan service, right? Which in some ways they are poking fun off as well, not of the fans, but just
Hmm.
kind of what this whole thing has become now. So it's an interesting kind of commentary, more from like a business standpoint than even like a storytelling standpoint. I don't know. For somebody who's like a casual watcher of all of this, even though because I, follow the business and what have you,
Hmm.
my head kept going in that direction of like, oh, this is maybe why they're doing this. And that too kind of took me out of the movie a lot, to be honest. I don't know. It's an interesting experiment. I'm glad that they tried, especially given where superhero movies are. We are sort of in the low point of it, and this movie obviously doing really well and
Yeah.
such. So
Yeah.
happy for that. But yeah, it's an interesting exercise. I kept wondering, who is this for? Is this for everybody? Is this for just for the fans? Is it for the older fans who grew up with all this? Like, what is the point?
Yeah, I think what this movie does successfully, I think, is it does all of that. Like it has
Yeah,
the older, again, those Fox Fantastic Four movie from like at this point almost 20 years ago now that maybe if you're 12, you don't even know that existed. But if you were 12 at the time, that might have been your favorite movie. I mean, I don't like those films, but there are people that actually
I
stand
still
by those.
enjoyed it from my memory
Yeah,
of them. Is like,
yeah,
they were
I
fun
didn't at
when
the
they came
time,
out.
but it was fun to see Johnny Storm back. And then they
Yeah,
have that brilliant montage in the beginning of the film where he's going through all the different comic book versions of Wolverine, and
I
seeing
know.
some of those on screen was just incredible. So that ticks a box for, the hardcore X-Men fans or just the fans of X-Men that recognize, oh yeah, that's the cover from that Uncanny X-Men issue. Oh, this is Age of
Right,
Apocalypse Wolverine. Comic book accurate height size Wolverine was
right.
just incredible. And I'm like, yeah, I remember at the time being really upset they cast Hugh Jackman in the role because I'm like, he's like 6 feet tall. This is stupid. This isn't going to work. Like back in 2000. And now that just sort of shows that, like, no, you can't always be comic book accurate. Sometimes that looks ridiculous, like it did there. So that ticks the box there for those fans. I think just the humor, like Ryan Reynolds' shtick, is pretty broad. A lot of
Yeah.
the humor that he's doing that isn't the meta commentary piece. I think they're kind of why this movie works and is being so successful right now at the box office. And I do think it'll probably end up being the biggest movie of the year, is because for Marvel is back to, I think, going more broad with the appeal instead of the last couple of their movies. I think had really just been playing to not only just comic book fans but just fans of the MCU. Like you have to have seen every movie, you have to watch all these shows,
Right.
you have to be really into what they're doing to get any enjoyment out of it. I mean, the last Marvel movie I saw, which was the Marvels, it was a Friday night Chinese theater, big theater here in LA, and there was about 20% of the theater was full. And like no
Mhm.
one really responded well to the movie versus this I saw opening night at the Chinese theater, completely packed, people in,
Right.
t-shirts and, the audience going crazy. I mean, geez, that scene when Wolverine puts his mask on was
Yeah.
insane. Like he reached his hands back there and I literally screamed like, "Oh my God, they're about to do what we've wanted them to do for 24 years." And then everyone's sort of erupting. So it's bringing a lot of that feeling back, which I
But
also was
isn't
fun
all that
as a
just for
theater.
the fans then? From everything you said to me, it's just for the fans.
Well, it's the different levels of the fans is what I mean. Like the
Right.
comic book fans, the fans of the movie that also never got to see him in a comic book, accurate suit or doesn't have the mask on. And these X-Men movies were really popular, but they were popular with more. And we'll get into this when we get into some of these films too. I think they weren't just aimed at the nerd audience. Those
Right.
original X-Men films, they were because there was no nerd audience yet. They
Right.
created that, I think. So that's what I thought the movie was successful at doing, like ticking those boxes for all the different types of people to be going to the movies instead of just, okay, well, have you seen the TV show? Well, if you haven't, like, you got to
Yeah,
go back and
that
watch
part
7 episodes of
definitely.
this.
Yeah.
And like, even though they made fun of that in the movie, obviously with
Yeah.
Loki season 2, the cloud thing appearing, but it doesn't really, it's a joke. It's not important for your enjoyment out of the film
Yeah.
is what I thought was so well handled.
I do agree with that, that it's not doing the whole you have to have seen everything and such. But I do think in doing what they did, it sort of is for the super fans, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that bucket is slightly bigger than the absolute Marvel fan bucket that sort of watch everything, but it still is for the super fans. The hat on the hat on the hat on the hat thing is sort of the thing that,
You don't respond to that.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
respond to that. And maybe a lot of it has to do with just Ryan Reynolds
Mm.
personally. I mean, I don't know. The guy, I'm sure, is fine, but like he all of this stuff of Free Guy and such, like, I mean, sure, this is a Deadpool character, but I feel like he's the same across the board. That's sort of what
Well,
he's become now.
Well, I think
And
what was so brilliant about him though is he
yeah.
was Deadpool. Like his screen persona and his type of humor was Deadpool before he was even cast in it.
Right,
It's one of those like perfect blending of this
right,
is who you are and this is who this character's been for, 10, 15 years in the comics. So you're like dream casting for this.
right.
It matches, and that's why it feels like Ryan Reynolds, but it's Wade Wilson because they're both kind of one and the same in terms of
And
their
that's
their
the
brand
thing,
of
right? If you
humor.
don't like either
That's
of
true.
them
Yeah,
or
it's not
both
gonna
of
work.
them, then it's not gonna work. And
Yeah.
I'm in that camp. Like, honestly, I would love to maybe bring somebody else, like a fresher person, and have like a different take on it. I don't know. But
Oh, to play Deadpool.
yeah,
Oh, geez, no way. No, no,
no
that's
way.
that. No, and the same thing with Hugh Jackman. I think in this movie he proved there can't be until, and like they said in the movie, we'll be playing this till you're 90. That's fine with
Yeah,
me. Like I don't think they
that
should
I'm okay
recast
with.
this. I think this proved it to me that like he is Wolverine even at his age of like almost 60 now. Like he's got the abs, looks
Yeah.
amazing. He's got the chest, looks amazing. Still can pull off those action scenes. But just one other thing I want to end on, I guess, in terms of my thoughts, was actually the ending of the movie itself. So I mentioned I
Mm.
laughed a lot, which I did. I think it was the funniest movie. But I do it. I have to admit, the ending surprisingly made me cry, and this was actually as actually one thing too. Like listeners of this podcast will know, I love whenever a movie ends with a blooper reel, behind the scenes, or a dance montage. And this movie was surprised out of nowhere, ended with a montage of the X-Men franchise of the last 24 years and of these behind the scenes of,
Mm.
Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, with a couple interviews of Hugh Jackman talking about how he first loves Wolverine and Ryan Reynolds talking about he loves Deadpool, set to Green Day's Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. Out of nowhere, this thing just pops up after this, very funny movie, and it's this incredibly heartfelt montage that honestly, like I'm a sucker for when the song plays. It some, it gives me emotional. I love Green Day, but yeah, this just really hit me of like, wow, these movies were really important to me. I mean, you can tell it was clearly important to all the people working on these films. Like again, we mentioned about how much Hugh Jackman really cares about the character, and same thing with Ryan Reynolds. But just that love of them on the set having such a good time, just reminiscing like, damn, this is 24 years of my life thinking about all the times that I
Mm.
went to the X-Men 2 premiere with my friends. They had a promotion for the Daredevil Fox movie where if you bought this popcorn at a certain theater, you get a DVD with an exclusive trailer before the movie came out. And we were like in college, like driving around trying to find like the popcorn bucket, and just all the people I saw all these midnight movies with of the X-Men films over the last 24 years. Even if the movie sucked, like X-Men Origins Wolverine, like I remember all these things, like the friends that I went there with, the people that I'm not friends with anymore, some of the friends I'm still friends with now. And like all these memories are coming back to me, and just how important these movies were to me and how long they've been in our lives. And it was an ending of a chapter. Like this movie was like a goodbye to these pre-MCU
Mhm.
Marvel films, which was the beginning of all this, more innocent
Right.
times. And yeah, that just ending also on a song that is about goodbye and starting on a song, actually, the opening montage, the In Sync, bye, bye, bye too. Sort of like bookends the films on farewells, which I think is a lot of what this movie also is about, like sort of accepting that things end and, you know, whether you get laid off or feel rejected, sometimes it's just part of life. And I don't know, I just started crying in the theater.
Oh my
The second that it
gosh.
started, I'm like, oh my God, are they doing this? And at first I thought it was gonna be like a joke thing. And then I'm like, oh my God, they're playing this serious. Uh-oh, I'm not gonna be able to hold back. That I left the theater just with this warm feeling inside of just how important these movies were to me because of that montage. I don't know if you got similarly choked up or it already halfway out the theater at that point because you're like, I gotta get the hell out of here. But yeah, that
Yeah.
I was not expecting that, and it just really touched me. It touched
Yeah.
me in all the right ways.
No, I get it, like when you've had that sort of an association and, your life and friendships and relationships, they're all tied to these movies. It obviously will land on you or anybody in a totally
Hmm.
different way. So I get that. I obviously didn't have that, but even I mean, I didn't choke up or anything, but it was a little bit of a walk down memory lane for sure. Because, we were of that age at that time, and
Hmm.
all of this life was ahead of us. So much has happened, these are sort of the critical years of our lives, the last 20 years. So, you can't help but not think that. But yeah, to me, like I said, like the meta-ness and the self-awareness of it all, even in this aspect, even though it's sincere, it's still very self-aware. All of that is, I don't know. It's not for me.
Best movie of the year so far for me.
Well, that's good, I mean, it's been a bit of a drier spell.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's connected to box office too. I think
Yeah.
the industry needs to have a bigger jolt in the arm. And I knew this was coming and I suspected it was going to be huge, but it's also nice to see that hashtag movies are back. We can say it again.
Mhm.
People a month ago, there were all these think pieces about, oh, cinema's dead. I'm like, guys, like, calm down. Like, this is stupid.
Yeah, we
Why are
already
we,
had $1 billion movie and Inside
yeah,
Out too.
exactly.
So
Like, why are we even doing this every time one movie kind of a
yeah,
bad movie doesn't do well? You're freaking out. So I'm glad that this sort of puts all that to
yeah.
rest. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.